This tutorial that I'm about to show you is something that I really enjoy. It is actually my most used Photoshop technique that I do in the majority of my work. Now, what I'm about to show you can be done several different ways. It's just like anything else in Lightroom and Photoshop. There may be several different ways to accomplish what you're trying to. The technique that I'm about to show you using what's known as the history brush really works for me, and I'll explain as we go why that is. When you take a look at this image right here, I'm going to show you how I went from this image, which is right out of camera, and then from there was able to create an award-winning image that is that one, and that actually hangs as a 40-inch piece in my gallery. So we went from that to that through various techniques, but a primary part of how I did this is using something called the history brush and painting with light back into areas. And so I'm going to show you that, and I really hope that you enjoy this, and I hope that this is something that you find that works and really helps you in your editing journey. So my first step when working on all my images is going to be to work in the either camera raw module within Photoshop, or if you're working in Lightroom, the develop module, which is the same exact idea. And most of you are probably working in Lightroom using the develop module, as that's probably how you organize. And if you've been following our tutorials and you've started from kind of brand new, that's what we recommend. But I'm in that type of module here, and I did some work to it, and all I did to start was I just worked my sliders a bit, got it to where it looked, pretty good to begin with. And then what I did is I decided to convert this and go black and white. The reason I did black and white is I felt like it would be stronger from a visual standpoint. The way I do black and white, I have a tutorial on that as well, but I do not use all of the presets, although they can be really good as a base and foundation. The thing to keep in mind about going black and white is that all of the color channels have to be turned off. Now, back in the old days, we had to go in individually, turn off all of our different color channels. So we have all these different color channels, and we would actually have to go through and we turn each color channel off in Photoshop. Now, when we simply take our vibrance and our saturation all the way down, that is giving us a brand new black and white with all of the details, and it's a true black and white tone that has not been manipulated. All we've done is taken all of the color channels out, but we're able to do that in 2 sliders. And it's not a preset thing, so you can see it's kind of dull and gray, but that's okay. We're going to work with that, but that is the starting point for me with my black and white. Now you can see we have a long way to go from here to get to here. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours on this, which is what I did with this particular image. Whenever I work an image, I do spend a lot of time, and then I will come back to it and take a look and work on it again with fresh eyes. But right off the bat, you can see where my crop is. And so I cropped out all of that top area up there, but I'm going to do that last. I like to work my images without a crop first. I like to be able to play with the image after the fact, and then crop where I want it to crop. So when I say after the fact, what I mean by that is I like to work the image, then after the fact, I like to crop it exactly where I want. And I realize that I may work some areas that maybe I end up cropping out. That's okay. I like to have the full image kind of at my disposal to use. And so therefore I crop at the very end of my editing process. Now for this technique, there are 2 ways you can go about it. We can create another layer if we want to and work in layers. That is one thing we can do. The other way that we can do this is just not worry about layers. So I'm going to do this without worrying about layers right now. I do recommend that if you get in very, very intense on doing this with a lot of different uses of this technique in one image, that you might want to do that in layers. But for now, let me just start with doing this a separate way, and that's going to ask us to have the window history panel open. So that window is our history panel, and I'm going to have that open. And I want you to pay particularly close attention to this little camera right here. This little camera creates a snapshot of what we just did. You can see I've just taken a snapshot. And all of the history of what we're about to do, when I do something as an example, it will show up in the history. Now, the second I close out of this, all of those steps are gone. So you have to remember that. And so those steps go away the moment that you close up your image in Photoshop. All right. So just keep that in mind. And so you want to save as you go if you've got something you particularly like to do. And if you're a Lightroom user, you can go ahead and save, and it shows up in your Lightroom box. And the thing about it will be, it will start right where you left off, but it will not save all of these steps. So keep that in mind. All right, so a basic way that this is going to work is we're going to paint back history. And the way we're going to do that, first thing I'm going to do, just to give you an idea, is I'm going to take this image and I'm going to actually make it really dark. Why dark? Well, I like my images, when I do this technique, to paint light back into a dark area. It works for me visually to see. By the way, I just did Control L, Control or Command L if you're on a Mac, is levels. That's a good way that you can get to this, and you can do things like this. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make this really, really dark. Now, I want you to see something here. I want you to see the natural way this light flows. See that? And that is where I want to lead my viewer. And when everything is dark like this, the viewer automatically comes in and leads through these highlighted areas. So I want to work with that, but I also, of course, want to lighten some of the other areas up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a snapshot. And you can see here was my snapshot before. Here's my snapshot after. And now I'm going to take the history brush. I'm going to place my history brush on the previous snapshot, but I'm going to highlight the second snapshot. Currently, think about this like an airbrush, and I'm going to do this very heavy-handed to start with, just so you can see how this works. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the history from the one before to this one now, and watch how this works. It does not work like that. That's not how it's supposed to work. Oh, that's funny. You know what I did is I used the regular brush. See, even I make mistakes. Now, why am I leaving that in here? Because it's important for you to understand when you do something and it doesn't go exactly like planned. You must be doing something wrong. Well, that happens to the best of us. So let's go back down. Here is the history brush. There we go. Now let's try that again. I'm going to take the history brush, paint from this one, highlight this one. Here we go. See how that's working? I'm highlighting, bringing back in. I'm painting back in the history. Let me take my opacity up really high again. This is just so you can see how it works. See how I can paint that history back? Now we could do that in a separate layer as well. I could create a layer. I can create that layer. I can duplicate this layer right here. So we come in here and we can go ahead and we can duplicate this layer. Make a copy of that layer. All right. So that one here. And let's go ahead and let's do an edit to this one. Make it really dark like that, as you can see. And now I'm going to use the history brush once again. And you're going to see, remember that we can conceal and reveal, but what I'm doing here is black conceals, white reveals. So black down here, I'm concealing from the image up here, which is letting the other image come through. So I can do the same kind of idea. Now this was very, very heavy-handed just to show you. And that's a way you can continue to do this and be, as we call, non-destructive. And you can have these various layers. So when you close your image, you have each of those steps along the way. With that said, if you're not doing tons and tons of work into the image that way, I find just by using this history panel here and working my main image that works great for me. It really is a choice up to you. So let me come back here now and let's go ahead and keep working this image. So basically here was our image. Remember, we started to paint back. I'm going to start again because that was really heavy-handed. And we're going to paint in this area, but I want to accentuate the light and where I'm drawing my viewer. I'm going to take the opacity down and the flow down. The idea is to kind of use it like a paintbrush and bring your viewer in. See how I'm bringing the viewer in and then into here and then through, right? So I've created naturally this. Now this is still too dark and we can keep playing with that. And what we can do is be very gentle. We can turn the opacity down, the flow down, and just kind of gently lighten areas that are a little too dark, but leave that idea of leading our viewer in and through the image. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. And this is very, very, very strong in order to lead your viewers through the image. Now at that point, look, I'm going to take a snapshot. Here's where we started, and here's where we're at. And you can see it's starting to kind of come to life a little bit. Now, it doesn't have quite the visual impact that I want with contrast and things like that, so we can play with that. We can always go back into our camera raw filter or back to the develop module in Lightroom. It's really your choice. But as I open that, maybe I want to play with contrast a little bit. And now as I create that contrast, I know that I am also darkening everything up again. That's okay. We can do the same thing and paint back areas. So it's really about working the image over and over, playing with it to kind of get yourself to where you're creating exactly what you want. Now, again, for time's sake, I'm doing this in, 13, 14 minutes. So it's not going to be the same as my finished image, but it is giving you an idea of where we went. So here we go. I've got that. I took my snapshot for the heck of it. Let's go ahead and make the whole thing darker one more time. Take a snapshot. Now let me paint back from this one to this one. Again, a little bit more gently. Yeah, it's a little too gently. Turn the opacity up and how much it comes out as well. How much flow comes out. And again, you can see what we're doing. And I'm creating drama with light and shadow. I'm creating drama with light and shadow. And again, now when you look at my finished image, you can see I spent a lot of time, and I also flipped the image. Why did I do that? Because it led you from this way into those houses, and I just felt like that was stronger. As you can see right now, this is not bright enough. So guess what we can also do? We can go the other opposite way. We can make everything brighter like this. I'll take a snapshot. Okay, take a snapshot. And now let me paint from that one back to this one and watch what happens. See how I'm creating that nice highlight and shadow? You get the idea where we're going here. So that's basically how I worked that image, folks. That is exactly what I did. Then basically I took the image, I rotated it. At this point, I would save that image. Again, I'm going to lose those steps along the way. That's okay. I've got my original as well, no problem. But I'm going to flip that image. And then what we did is I went in and I started playing with the crop, and you can decide what you like. But basically what I did is I felt there was too much in here, came up in here, created a little bit more of a pano feel to it. And then once that is done, you can continue doing this. Like I might look at this and say, okay, well, that's still a little bit too dark for me. That's no problem. I can go ahead and again, just one area if I want. Again, Control or Command L. Like I'm going to do this whole thing, but really I'm concerned about the boat here. No problem. I'll take that snapshot. Here's what I had. I'm going to paint back from that one to that one. Got to be on the history brush. Remember, we don't want to make that mistake again. See that? And along that trail. And I don't want too heavy vignette, so I'm just gently, and again, I'm just kind of like a paintbrush. Think about it like I'm painting with light. I'm painting a scene. I love painting light into dark because I believe it helps the viewer. You can see where the light is, and it helps take you on a journey through the image.